G'day everyone and welcome to videos 3.2.11 for the Legal Studies Guy, where we're going to extend our knowledge of civil remedies a little bit. Our quote for today is from Scott Belsky. It's not about ideas, it's about making ideas happen. Common conversation that I will have with some of my year 12s or just other students in general, or other people in my life in general, is if you're not happy with something, if you've got a problem, don't get stuck on the problem. And don't even get stuck on, coming up with solutions. Yeah, obviously I could try this, or I could do this with my study habits, or I could do this with what I do in class time. But then it's ultimately about putting things in place to make those solutions happen and actually going and doing them. And that's where most people generally fall down. Most of us are good at coming up with ideas for ways we could improve ourselves or improve our study. But most of us are pretty darn bad about actually doing it. So that's the key thing. Don't just think of an idea. Don't just think of a solution. Make it happen. As I said, we're extending our knowledge of civil remedies today. And this is where we'll be looking at specifically damages and injunctions, which are two types of civil remedy. Where this study design gets a little bit interesting or tricky is the language around and their specific purposes, as in what are the specific purposes of damages and injunctions. And with damages particularly, there are a couple of types of damages that serve a different purpose to that general purpose of remedies from last lesson. But what we are going to do is we are going to basically look at this from the assumption that damages and injunctions, as their purpose, they are aiming to return you to your original position. So just that general purpose of remedies again, and we're saying that damages and injunctions are ultimately trying to do this, except for in a couple of specific circumstances that we'll look at. The key skill is discussing the ability of remedies to achieve these purposes. So actually looking at when can they return you to your original position and when can't they, and we'll have a couple of tables to look at that. So hopefully at the end you'll be able to answer this question. What are damages and injunctions? And what purpose do they achieve? So first up, damages. Damages are the most well-known civil remedy, and it's effectively money. So this is the one you'll hear about, such and such sued this person and was awarded $4.5 million in damages, aka Rebel Wilson. Or, the bushfires class action from a couple of years ago, $500 million in damages. So this is the sum of money that is aiming to compensate the plaintiff or plaintiffs to the extent that money is able to do so. And there are different types of damages that exist to address different scenarios. And these are these ones. First up, the most common, which is compensatory damages. And these can be specific or general. And this is effectively, hey, I've lost an amount of money from this incident or from this harm, and I need it back to me. So I've been punched in the face and had to spend $300,000 on different medical surgeries to fix the issues caused. I want that $300,000 back because I shouldn't have had to spend that. So these are things like medical expenses, loss of earnings because you haven't been able to work, or if it's something to do with financial deception or loss of property, the cost of that property that you've lost. So specific compensatory damages can be really, really easily calculated. Beyond that, you then go into the realm of general damages, and these are things that you can't quite calculate exactly, but you can kind of take a guess at. So future loss of earnings, how much you might, lose over the rest of your life, say if you've lost your hand or you've lost your leg. Suffering, so the harm caused, the emotional stress caused also comes into it. Then you have aggravated damages, which can be paid on top. And aggravated damages are when the plaintiff has suffered some form of extreme insult or humiliation. So beyond the realms of, just the normal insult or humiliation. And this is decided by the judge. So it's where the defendant has acted in a nasty or offensive way. So we can really talk about, and I'll link you to an article later, but we can really talk about Rebel Wilson here. Her damages in her suit against Bauer Media, the $4.5 million she got, a chunk of that was based on loss of earnings from movie roles she wasn't able to basically get based on what was in the article. she also got some, obviously, her legal bills and stuff paid. But a chunk of the damages they gave her were aggravated damages as well, where the judge said Bauer Media deliberately tried to humiliate you. They were deliberately nasty. Okay? They published something that they should have known probably wasn't true because they were trying to humiliate you and insult you. And as a result, you get an extra few $100,000. So aggravated damages are sort of like that. Yeah, they've also done this poor thing that you need to get some extra money for. Beyond that, you have 3 other types of damages that are not so common and serve slightly different purposes. So you've got nominal damages, and this is where, so nominal meaning not much, this is where the plaintiff only wants a small amount of money, and it's more about the moral victory of winning the case. So it's like, I'm just trying to prove a legal point here by defeating you, but I don't really want money or anything for it. This is kind of the opposite of contemptuous damages, which is also a small amount of money paid. But this is where the court acknowledges that, yes, there was a legal issue here that's been breached, but, like, you don't deserve money. It's not, it's not that bad. You're kind of doing this just to be an arsehole. This might be something like a big company pursuing an individual, and, it's almost looking at the fact that, look, you've put them through a lot of this stress and harm for something that's, legally right, but you've been a little bit of a prick about it. So we're going to give you no money, or we're only going to give you a tiny little amount of money. The final one is punitive damages. And punitive damages are where really large sums of money are paid to a plaintiff that might not actually be related to the magnitude of harm suffered. So this is where, again, a defendant has acted in a way that is really malicious or reckless or cruel. Okay? These are known as exemplary damages because this purpose, or the purpose of these ones, is more about making an example of someone, okay? Actually really punishing them, as opposed to just returning the person to their original position. Our second remedy that we need to know about is injunctions. An injunction is a court order, okay? So it's an order handed down by a judge in the courtroom that either prevents the defendant from doing something or compels them to do something. So a restrictive injunction, so stopping you from a certain action, or a mandatory injunction which says you have to go and do this. A restrictive injunction might include stopping you from contacting someone. Okay? A mandatory injunction might be about telling you need to go and do something to fulfill a contract, be it building an extra room on a house, or adding something into some works you did for someone. Okay? These injunctions can also be temporary, which means short-term. Temporary injunctions aren't so much, or interlocutory injunctions aren't so much a remedy that's handed out at the end of a trial. They're often handed out early on, so like in directions hearings perhaps, or just any pre-trial hearing, where you are basically saying, hey, you need to stop doing this thing until the trial is resolved. Okay? This is as distinct from these perpetual or permanent injunctions that happen at the end of a trial. So basically, okay, this is over, and I'm going to make a perpetual injunction that you must not do this action, or you must not contact this person, and will remain in force in perpetuity. So basically until the end of time, or unless they're altered or revoked at a later date. As I said at the top, we are discussing the ability of remedies to achieve their purposes, and we are going to view this as discussing if they can return you to your original position or not. So if this was a question, to what extent are damages or injunctions able to achieve the purposes of civil remedies? So to what extent can they return you to your original position? You would look at this. Damages. Yes. Especially like if there's economic loss, they're going to return you to your original position. You might even be able to calculate the exact amount of money you've lost, like loss of wages. Perfect for returning you to the position you were in prior to the harm. Same with the fact that most people like money. So they're happy with it as a form of compensation. They feel better. They are returned to a position they were in prior to the harm occurring. But damages can only compensate for the infringement. It doesn't take into account the stress caused from going to trial and the time this takes. Also, there are certain things that money can't really fully account for. Like, Loss of function. Imagine if you lose your leg or your arm. How do you ever get returned to your original position just from money? You can't really calculate that. You could also look at the fact there's no long-term effect on the defendant, particularly if they've got the means to pay. There's not really necessary for them to perhaps change their behaviour. What happens if the harm occurs again because all they had to do was hand over some money? And there are restrictions on how much you can be compensated, which means that you might not actually be fully returned to the position you were in prior. What about injunctions? Again, great. Mandatory ones can make someone fulfill a contract perhaps, okay, returning you to the position you should have been in. Okay? Same with restrictive injunctions. You were suffering no harm, you started suffering harm. Stopping that person from doing something removes that harm. So you are back to that original position. So both of these really, really good at getting into the original position. However, if the defendant refuses to comply, if they don't follow through or they keep harming you, you're going to have to take further court action. So this is really in line with the top of this section of the study design with the whole enforcement issues. What if they don't comply? Okay? And as well as that, compared to damages, you might not actually receive any tangible compensation. You might not actually receive any benefit, okay, apart from the person going away, meaning you don't really get anything out of it. Let's evaluate our ability of remedies to achieve the principles of justice. As always, you can have a crack at this yourself, or we'll flick through in 3, 2, 1. A lot here, okay? Quickly, equality, same purpose across all cases. Okay, that's, trying to return you to your original position. And access, getting money, that's an easy thing to understand. Most of the stuff about damages and injunctions is going to sit in fairness. Okay, cases involving economic loss, damages are fair because you can get that money back. And if it's a judge calculating, okay, they're legal experts, so they should give you the right amount. However, emotional harm can't be accurately measured, so you might not get enough, which might be unfair, or you might get given too much, which is unfair on the other party. And as well as this, if there's a jury, and we've just got the bell music going at school over the top here, if we've got a jury present, they actually decide the damages in some circumstances, except for defamation cases, and they won't decide loss of earnings. But they do decide some of the damages, and they're not legal experts. Also, equality, remedies are not subject to any precedent, so they can differ from case to case. So similar situations with different judges or different juries might get wildly different damages awarded. And also, in terms of access, they can just be hard to understand because there's 4 types of injunction and 5 types of damages, and as well as that, with the enforcement issues adding to the time it takes to dispute or rectify the dispute. To finish off, synthesizing and applying to cases, here's an injunction awarded against logging, which I'll post below. So that's an interlocutory injunction why a matter is resolved further. And then here's an article on the damages Rebel Wilson was given, particularly the different types are included in this article and the fact that there'll be an appeal against them. As always, reviewing, can you answer our essential question? Do you know what damages and injunctions are and what purpose they achieve? If you can answer that, you've achieved 3.2.11. This has been the Legal Studies Guy. Make sure to leave some comments, some ratings, etc. And we'll be back with a new video, 3.2.12, really soon.